Hello everyone, and welcome to a new video. This time we'll be taking a look at legendary Seliph. So, my boy finally decided to get a legendary ult, which, boy, that feels really weird. Though, sadly he is a horse unit, but, well, that was kind of to be expected. This banner also kind of made me realize something that I should have realized a long time ago, which is the fact that Sigurd is never going to get a legendary ult, as legendary ults are more like based off the character a few years after the game. So, you know, when they have grown into the role of a ruler, like, you know, Seliph grew into the role of the ruler of Groundvale. I believe that's how you pronounce it. And, you know, as a result, he's kind of the king of this area. Sigurd kind of can't have something like that happening because of the event of Gen 1. I'm not going to spoil it for obvious reasons, but, I mean, you know, Sigurd is basically not going to get a legendary hero variant period unless they do one based off a specific event that happens in Gen 2, which, please don't have high expectation of that happening ever. So, you know, this is kind of what it is. But, enough of that, let's talk about the character itself, eh? So, Seliph. Boy, oh boy, Seliph. I almost wish he dismounted. He is a fairly solid unit overall, but, well, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Here, the way his weapon works, okay, is that, and I do want to make this clear for everyone, if foe initiates or if unit's HP is below 100%, at start of combat inflicts attack and death -6 on foe during combat, and if unit deals damage to foe during combat, restores 7 HP to unit. Now, there's a few things to keep in mind in this. This basically means if you do not fulfill the requirement, the weapon does fuck all. Okay, so that means you need to be below 100% HP, or to be on enemy phase for it to do anything. So in most cases, if you just rely on his base kit, that means enemy phase or nothing, because the weapon will naturally heal you. Which, yikes, that's kind of iffy overall. But also his B skill does help his enemy phase, so that's not as bad. If unit's HP is over 50%, and foe initiates combat, unit makes a guaranteed follow-up attack before foe can counterattack. The best way to really describe this is quick repose desperation for enemy phase. So essentially the idea is you get hit, then you hit back twice, and then the enemy gets to do their second hit. It's pretty simple, but yes, it's not Vantage or anything of the sort. I have a few people that believe that was what it meant, but yeah, no, it literally lets the enemy still take a hit, but then you do 2 more, so you heal yourself back by 14, and the enemy also lose 6 attack and death beforehand, which is pretty strong overall. As far as the stat line is concerned, he is very similar to Red, but is extremely different. Please do not go ahead and say, oh, man, that means Rid is completely worthless. That's just wrong. But I'll go back to this on the comparison. Anyway, the idea with this weapon is that you don't want to be at full HP, so anything that does recoil damage can be very good. You can use Fury 4 in tandem with this, so the weapon is always active. Or you can also, alternatively, run a push skill. Push skills are actually fairly solid on him, and, well, it basically allows you to always have less than max HP. The weapon will keep healing you back to full, and in some cases can allow you to do more than the one set that this character basically comes with. So, another thing also to note is that he's a pair-up unit scoring for 180 BST despite being a cav, because that's literally the only purpose of pair-up units. The pair-up unit gimmick serves no purpose. The only utility you get out of a pair-up unit at this point, because pair-up units the pair-up gimmick works nowhere except in pointless modes, except the Legion's Battle, which only works all the time now. Thank you, for whatever reason you decided to do this change. Anyway, so as a result, he's pretty much useless anywhere but pair up, like Legion's Battle, as far as pair up goes. So, you know, the only thing he has going for him is having 300 SP skill in the A, B, and C slots, as well as a 400 SP weapon. So, of course, he scores really well as a result. He scores only one bin lower than Edelgard as a result, though essentially there's two characters that scores better than him, which are Legendary Crumb. Yes, Legendary Crumb scores for 180 BST for literally no reason. And in case you don't know, to change fate, you think that's a 400 SP skill. No, 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 it's a 500 SP skill for literally no reason. Go figure. Thank you, IS, very cool. But yes, as a result, he scores the same as Edelgard. Edelgard. An armored unit. Hello, I am a ranged infantry unit that has access to 1,000,000 skill to make myself absolutely disgustingly annoying to deal with. And I score the same thing as the best scoring armored unit of the game. Makes sense. Seliph at the end of the day is also just a cav. The main problem I have, honestly, with his entire kit is the fact that Holy War's Hand is a B slot. If that had been a unique distinct counter that also had Holy War's Hand in it, I would have been a lot more okay with it, because overall, that would still be balanced. If you let him initiate on you, he's basically pointless. But it would also have opened his B slot for LOL skills, and at the same time, even if you want to really patch his speed up, you need the A slot. Therefore, making both used as an A slot, a pref A slot, would have been just fine. That's just my opinion, though. Personally, I really like Seliph. Obviously, he's tied for second place as far as my favorite lords go. My favorite lord is Leaf, then it's Seliph tied with Dimitri and Eliwood. So, yeah, I really quite like the boy, so I'm quite glad to see this. Another thing to note is that Akira Egawa, this is a new name for Fire Emblem Heroes. This is an artist that has only done, as far as Fire Emblem is concerned, art for Cypher beforehand. But with Cypher ending, I guess he decided to branch out into Fire Emblem Heroes. You'll also notice that his attack art and his special art are completely different. There's like less than 10 characters that actually get something like this, okay? There's not a whole lot. There's Idun, there's the tumor that grew a body known as Ogma, Gunter Jagan Zephiel, and now Seliph. There might be some I missed, but that's really all the ones I have in mind. Oh, and I guess also Milla, because it's the same artist as Zephiel, Gunter, Ogma, and, you know. Yeah. I absolutely adore this art. As far as art goes, and it's really rare I even praise art or even mention art in my reviews, but as far as art is concerned, I think Legendary Seliph has literally the best art of any legendary hero of this game. His art is utterly amazing. I'm so glad I actually managed to get a copy of my boy as a result, not gonna lie. But enough of me fangasming over, you know, the art. Let's talk about comparison now, shall we? So. I did mention Rid and Seliph, how they have very similar stat line. But here's the big thing that makes Rid and Seliph different. Rid is more of a multi-phase fighter with the idea of getting one debuff up so you can then double them and typically kill them on player phase, something Seliph cannot do. And proc Gale Force to kill potentially something else, another threat. And, you know, just as a result have attack smoke dealt on everyone so that he can enemy phase the rest. This does not really work in AR anymore, but as far as Gale Force goes, he's a good hit and run character because a lot of characters in AR tends to be fairly bulky. So, you know, obviously he's really good. I have him at plus 10, so I feel like I'm pretty pretty up there as far as someone that can actually give you a good information as far as Rid goes. I've used him extensively. He's genuinely one of the plus 10 I've used the most. And I can assure you, that player phase is disgusting. The only condition you need to have is the enemy having a debuff. And the only problem he has is that he typically will be stopped by enemies that block follow-up unless he has a buff in speed. So stuff like Edelgar, stuff like Surtur, you will not double them unless you have a speed buff on the team. But if you have a speed buff on the team, you will destroy them, more often than not. So there's that, of course. But yeah, overall a fairly solid unit. But the thing is, a lot of people compare Seliph to Rid and say Seliph completely supersedes what Rid does. Absolutely wrong. What Rid does is a player phase Gale Force unit with a solid enemy phase because he has a good amount of bulk. Like, just here, for example, you know, if you had Attack Smoke and a Def and Res buff, you are looking at 53 defense as well as 46 res in enemy phase, on top of, with an attack buff of course, 66 attack. So, you know, very good at taking enemy units as a result. If they don't have something to give them a guaranteed follow-up, or, you know, no follow-up, or if they don't have something to block your own follow-up, you'll typically just hit them twice and they'll die, okay? And that makes him utterly disgusting in certain cases, but overall, I do think in AR, he's not exactly the most solid unit. In AA, that's a completely different story. He's a very strong player phase unit. As far as Seliph goes, he is primarily an enemy phase unit, and as a result, that's kind of iffy, but also, even if you patch his speed, because it is possible, even if you patch his speed, which I believe you can hit 50 speed fairly decently at plus 10, and, you know, proc something like Gale Force, even if you do something like this, the problem you run into is that you hit too hard regardless. Rid has 60 attack, whereas Seliph has 61 in quotation. Because at the end of the day, Virtuous Turfing, if you are not at full HP, which the ideal ace slot for Seliph, kind of makes him go below full. Therefore, as a result, you will proc the effect all the time, so you're at 67 attack instead of 60. So as a result, and that's without attack plus, if you have attack plus, you're sitting at 71 attack. Jesus. Do you need this? Absolutely not. Especially since if you go for that build, speed plus is better. But as a result, you one-shot too often for Gale Force to actually work effectively. As far as the way he's meant to be used, he's mostly meant to be used, again, as an enemy phase unit, using, for example, Ignis, with Brave Lucina support. So basically you get hit back, proc Ignis. Whatever you're dealing with, if they get 2 hit, dies. That's just kind of a non-issue unless they have Guard or a Special Fighter or something similar. And that's if you don't just kill them by just smashing them twice very hard. Seliph hits extremely hard and, you know, as a result is fairly solid. I also had Reinhardt here because Reinhardt is used very similarly. But the thing is, as you can kind of tell, Reinhardt hits 50 attack, Seliph hits 67. The only thing Reinhardt has is the ability to quad, but the thing with the quad is that it doesn't really matter all that much. The other thing that he has going for him is the ability to run Vantage with Meister Schwartz, which, great. That allows him to run Moonbow. Moonbow. I don't think Moonbow is going to make any kind of shred of comparison compared to the 17 extra attack you have on Seliph. I'm sorry. Not to mention, Seliph gets innate regen from the weapon as well, which makes him a very strong enemy phase unit, a terrible player phase unit, but an insanely potent player phase unit. Enemy phase unit, my bad. So, obviously, as a result, Reinhardt is overall worse. Even if you just compare the stats like this, I mean, Seliph has 6 more def, 1 more res, and like 17 more attack, and then Well, I guess actually if you add Virtuous Turfing also to the Def and Res because the enemy loses 6 attack, it's more like 7 more Res and 12 more Def and 17 more attack while relatively having the same amount of speed and also having more HP. Reinhardt is overall a obsolete unit now, in my opinion, and he was already on that at that level for a while. Still, you can also use him in a player phase way, which is something Seliph cannot do. So obviously Reinhardt is on both phases, which is, you know, the one thing he really has going for himself at this point. Now, as far as Conrad is concerned, I only put him there just so you can really understand how stupid this boy is, and in terms of bulk, and the fact that his speed is actually salvageable. Kara Cudgel allows you to get 5 attack and defense as long as you're within 2 space of an ally. So as a result, you end up with 42 def and 43 res, as well as 58 attack. So that sounds really good until you realize Virtuous Turfing yet again. Virtuous Turfing basically makes it 67 attack on Seliph versus Conrad's 58. That's 9 more attack. As far as def and res are concerned, Seliph has 47-42. Conrad has 42-43. So 5 less defense for 1 more res. Obviously, Conrad is also a lot cheaper, and if you have gotten him to plus 10, they will do somewhat similar roles, but Seliph is able to be consistent with that beastlet to a point where 4 cooldown skills are a lot more dangerous on him than they are on Conrad. So obviously there's that, but then again, I don't think I'm surprising anyone. I'm comparing a 4 to 5 star, 4-star focus to a 5-star legendary. Of course the 5-star legendary should be better, but yeah. Overall, Seliph has carved himself a fairly strong niche as far as enemy phase are concerned. And as far as player phase goes, you can make that player phase work, but, well, let's show why it works. I'm going to talk about the side on the left first. Wait a second till I talk about the side on the right. The set on the left is very easy to get. It's basically the base kit except with joint drive attack. The idea is just to make Seliph's attack so high that it becomes borderline impossible to just tank him. As you can see, 67, 47, 42. If you let the enemy initiate on you, you effectively get plus 4 from joint drive attack, plus 4 from mirror stance, plus 6 from virtuous turfing, which effectively means 81 attack. 81 attack with a guaranteed follow-up on enemy phase, and also regen. The part where regen becomes really apparent is the fact that 47-46 defensively plus 6 ends up with 53 defense and 52 res. So if you are already at a point where the enemy struggles to do anything to you, and you add on top of that the fact that you heal for 7 every time you hit, Jesus Christ, no matter what happens, it's really hard to take down Seliph. But again, if you just, you know, enemy phase Seliph, and instead of attacking into him, he's not that dangerous, which is something I really like. Unlike Julia, who is just not very amazing, but more so annoying because of the fact that, you know, she has that lol all skill that just blocks Blade Tome completely. Or any type of buffs, which is really the only thing that's kind of annoying about her, just stopping Blade Tomes. So if you have to deal with 7 of them, you just cannot use your Blade Tomes as a result. But yeah, unlike something like that, which is just a pretty lame gimmick, here is a very easy way to deal with it. You just have to have a bulky blue that can actually do decent damage on enemy phase. That's all you need. Obviously, though, being able to proc a special is fairly important, especially with something like Moonbow or Bonfire, of course, if you're using something like Lucas with a slaying weapon, or, you know, his pref. If you can be bothered, because his pref is so underwhelming. But yeah, like, this is a good option to just, you know, deal with him. There's a lot of easy, cheap option to deal with him. He's not exactly broken in the end of the AI. Similar to Legendary Leaf, he's actually like built in a way that is not obnoxious to deal with, but is really good in the end of the player, which I absolutely adore. Mordecai is also a very good combo counter to him, if you want another type of counter that can work against him. At the end of the day, all you need is a good death stat also. So if you, for example, take Hinata with his Pref, that can work. Because even if Hinata is not exactly speedy, look at how fast this guy is. Most people are just going to run base kit, okay? I can already tell you this. People that are going to run the speed set on him are going to be absolutely extremely scarce, because the speed set is less effective than the other one, in my opinion. Except in specific cases, in which case, you know, just pelt them down with a mage. That's all you need to do. Like, Summer Legion completely destroys him, and so on and so forth. As long as, you know, they don't have DC, they are not going to be that much of a threat. So yeah. Overall, a fairly balanced unit, which I like quite a lot. As far as the set on the right goes, this is obviously using a push kill. As I mentioned earlier, push kills are some of Seliph's best friends if you don't want to run distant counter, because it keeps pushing your HP from full to less than full. So as a result, it's very easy to always have the weapon active. I really hope push skills become seals, because if they do become seals, you can actually run a few extra options with him pretty well. Like, for example, on the set on the left, you could run attack rest push 3. Obviously, it's not 4, and therefore you need to be at full HP. But with the way Seliph works, if you have a high merge Seliph, it should work just fine. And Mirror Stance is a very contested seal, so, you know. As for the set on the right, obviously, this is with Virtuous Turfing, and, you know, attack speed push 4 gives 7 speed, 3 from low attack speed, 4 from drain drive speed, and 4 from Swift Barrow 2. So you end up with 48 speed. If you want to hit 50, just have Summoner support, essentially. It's very doable. As far as the attack goes, you get 6 from attack speed push, 6 from the weapon, as well as 4 from the seal. So, you know, as a result, you get 83 attack. You can also note just run LOL speed def if you think that attack is what you want. Because if what you want is pure damage, hey, I don't judge. You'll have 86 attack. Another thing to note is if speed rest push 4 ever becomes an option, I would run that over attack speed push 4, because his attack is already good. Making his bulk better is even better, because then you end up with 56 def and 55 res. Really hard to take down. You're quick, so the enemy cannot follow up on you very easily. And on top of that, your attack is still really strong. So, you know, that works really well for you. Personally, I would still use low attack speed over speed def, but speed def is also an option overall. This build really only works at max merges, by the way. I just want to point that out. If you are not on max merges, you're better off settling for the set on the left. It's typically going to be a lot more helpful to you. But yeah, this set essentially lets you hit 83 attack, 48 speed, and as far as bulk goes, 56 defense and 48 res. So yeah, it is an extremely potent set. At that point, your lowest stat is effectively like 48 res. Well, or 45 HP, I guess. But yeah. Very, 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 very difficult unit to take down. And Virtuous Turfing will always be active. Again, you can use Gale Force, but you have just so much attack. I do not advise it at all. It's just not exactly worth it overall. So, yeah. Those are all the builds I had to showcase for Seliph. As far as Seliph is concerned, he is an extremely good unit, but he's also a very predictable unit. there's not a whole lot of sets you can really do with him, and this is really like all I could think up myself. There's just not a whole lot of option for him. That's just kind of what it is. Like I said, if his B skill was fused with his A skill, you could also use LOL skills on top of it. It would still not even be that annoying to deal with. But, oh well. I mean, it's kind of what it is. I can't really change anything here. Yeah. So, let's talk about the banner itself, shall we? So, right off the gate, let's just make this as easy as possible. Red is the best. Wait. Well, red and blue are the best. It's kind of depending on what you're doing, or what you want. And then you have green as the third best, and by this I mean second worst. And then you have colorless, that is just don't pull on that garbage. It's utterly terrible. So, yeah. That's a TLDR. Now, if you want to have more of my opinion, Seliph is a really good unit overall to have, and if you do not want him, he has 2 300 SP skills to Fodder, which are very good. Distant counter, by the way, the fact that he's yellow, I consider it to be good fodder, okay? Because I had a few people asking me this question. Hey Jay, why is there like no green on any of your banner? It's because when you have something that's green, it's a really, really, really good fodder that can be used on several units, and it isn't niche at all and is not easy to obtain. This thing counter is on 13 different units, my dude. There's always going to be banners running Distant Counter, like, at least twice a month, it feels like. Well, maybe not twice, but at least once a month. Very easily, so it's not as precious as, say, low attack def, you know? Which honestly should be green here, because low attack def is useful on so many units. It is an insanely good low skills, and, you know, very useful as a result. Close counter should also be green. My bad. I need to update this after this video. So, yeah, overall, you know, it's typically skills that are hard to get, very premium, and just overall very useful skill. Though actually no, close counter should be yellow because close counter is useful on some unit but not a whole lot. Range units don't tend to have enough stats to really play around with close counter. There's definitely a few that can actually make use of it. All attack def though, it's good on so many units, dude. It's kind of ridiculous. So, yeah. Essentially, how can I put this? Yellow to me is like A+ to S- tier fodder. S+ tier fodder is what I consider green. And then like A to like C tier is what I consider red fodder. Okay? Like, don't think because a skill is not green that it's just irrelevant. That's completely untrue, okay? But yeah, moving on to the banner itself. Seliph, really good unit. Mirabilis, amazing unit. And Sophis, very okay good unit, I guess. Sophis is a really good unit for the fact that she doesn't have to deal with dragon killers. In fact, she just doesn't have a weakness. But overall, if you're just talking about stats, she's just basically a Fallen Corrin without the good prep that gives you 6 across the board, and, you know, immune to dragon killers. That doesn't give you a whole lot to work with, overall. And as far as fodder is concerned, attack speed solo is on a bunch of units, Wrath is literally available on a GHB unit, and Times Pulse is just extremely niche. Times Pulse is really good on a unit like Barst, like Shannon, but it's a very niche skill that very few units can actually make full use of. So, you know, overall, it's a fairly iffy skill. So, yeah, overall, red is fairly solid. Mirabilis is almost, I don't want to say a must-have, but it's definitely one of the best dancer of the game. Being able to debuff the enemy from any range is insane, and the fact that the debuff just spreads when you dance on something and there's anything within 4 space of you is disgusting. Even if not everything is within 4 space, if there's anything within 2 space of these units, they also get attacked by the -5 attack. And then the weapon procs and the enemy lose 3 attack, def, and res, which is even more stupid, because at that point, they have -8 attack. -8 attack, 3 def, 3 res. It's ridiculous, especially in a meta that revolves around debuff nowadays. Mirabilis is a really good one-off, basically, is what I mean. Just like Seliph is a really good one-off. The best way to really describe Seliph is if I had a tier list, which, speaking of, I've been asked in a comment to do a tier list on Legendary Heroes. I'm willing to do it, but it's not going to be attached to a Legendary banner anytime soon, and I just want to know if you guys are actually interested in that before I just spend like 40-50 hours working on a video that nobody cares about. Because a tier list like this, you see, whenever I do a tier list like GHB Tempestral tier list or Refined Priority tier list, you have to understand 2 things, yeah? One, it's already mostly up to date, okay, which means I only have to add 1 character, and sometimes lower certain characters because a new character was added that basically trivialize the use of the other character. And 2, upkeeping a tier list compared to making one from scratch is a lot longer. A lot easier, I mean. If I make a tier list from scratch, like, you know, something like the Legendary tier list, that's about 30 characters, which every one of them have a review of each character for like 20 to 30 minutes. Condensating this is going to be impossible. Essentially, the video is probably going to be 1 to 2 hours long, okay? So as a result, it's very difficult for me to just work on a video like this unless people are very into the idea. And even then, the first tier list update I'm going to make, or the first tier list period I would make as far as Legendary Heroes goes, is you know, it's going to be a standalone video because I can't tag this on a Legendary banner review. I'm sorry, I don't want to have a review of like 2.5 hours and people are just like, what the hell? What happened? What? I'm not touching that with a 10-foot pole. That's way too long. You see, so, you know, once the tier list would be done, I would do, you know, a new, whenever I would do a new banner review for Legendary, I would then add them to the tier list, because that's the easy part. If the tier list is already done, keeping it up to date is a lot easier as a result. But yeah, this is something that's going to be more of a passion project done on the side, so if I do work on it, and it doesn't come out by next week, yeah, like, I mean, give me like 2 months. It will not come out very quickly, to say the least. Also, I would need to... I don't know if I will separate Mythic and Legendary. I don't think it's really needed, because at the end of the day, they kind of serve the same purpose. I would do a tier list based on the character utility, rather than the character, you know, how helpful it is in this specific mode, you know? Like, you know, how strong is Legendary Crom in the end of the player versus in the end of the AI? How useful he is to have around because he's one of the best scoring units, because that's actually kind of important for Legendary Heroes. I'll still take that somewhat in consideration, but it's not going to be the main thing that will make me decide if a unit is good or trash. Okay? So, yeah, tangent aside, you know, if you want to see me work on this, do tell me. It's gonna be a lot of work, but, I mean, that's just kind of how it is. Better now than when it's not in quarantine, where I just will want to kill myself for having made this tier list. But whatever. Moving on. Next up, Blue. Legendary Crom, Legendary Azura, and Peony. So, all of these are pretty solid units. Peony is kind of a one-off, which you got for free, so I don't see exactly why you would go out of your way for her. Legendary Azura is still a very solid dancer to have, a lot of utility with extra movement, very good in tandem with Gale Force, and so on and so forth, which makes it overall a very good unit to have a one-off. As far as Chrom is concerned, oh, and also, if you're talking about Arena, plus thinning her is also fairly worth it, because then you'll be always using her during water season, you'll have access to a dancer for water season, and she'll also increase your score overall due to Blessing, which makes her very good. As far as Chrom is concerned, he is tied for strongest scoring unit as far as Arena is concerned with Edelgard. And yeah, shocking nobody, he is fairly solid, though in the end of the player he is a lot less dangerous than in the end of the AI. Let me explain. When I made my review on him, I do think it still holds true, even though I said that he's fairly underwhelming. Though, you know, not complete trash, but a bit underwhelming due to some issue he runs into. The thing is, I was looking from the point of view of in the player's hand. Dealing with him is a nightmare. Anyone that scores well enough in Arena that they have to deal with Chrom, like 4 match or more in Arena Assault, can attest to this. He is a pain in the ass, a thorn in your side, which is not exactly easy to counter. As far as unit that completely destroys him in one round, there's not a whole lot of option, okay? Because his speed is so awkwardly placed to a point where he can actually be speedy enough to just double something like Dorcas, which would normally double him and kill him without getting doubled. But because his speed is so weird, you can actually make him fast enough that he doubles Dorcas and then he kills him. Like, you know, this is one of your best free-to-play options to deal with ranged physical blue unit, but he doesn't actually work against Chrom because his speed is just this damn awkward. And that's the problem. A lot of counter that you may have can be countered by a difference set by Chrom, and that makes it very frustrating to deal with. At least the first few times that you had to deal with him, as far as, you know, the first time you had to deal with, there was really no true counter to him. You basically need a unit fast enough, but you also need like the unit to be green. And then even if the unit is green, you can't even buff your def. You lose 9 def in the process because you'll attack def in the weapon. You cannot debuff him. He will remove your buffs in def and attack. Like, it's just a nightmare to deal with him. If you want to deal with him, you basically need a fast green unit that also has a bulk of at least 60 plus Triangle Adept. I'm not even joking. If you don't have Triangle Adept, he can and will one-shot you. Because this guy here, can hit a total of 84 attack. Now, 84 attack by itself doesn't sound so bad, until you realize that he also does minus 9 attack and def on top of it. So in reality, he technically has 93 attack, except that 9 attack is not affected by combat triangle. So what ends up happening is that 84 attack goes down to 68 plus 9, so he still has 77 attack to hit you with. Yeah, if you have TA, that 77 will go down to 61. You are still prone to getting one-shot. And again, there's not much you can do to deal with it, which makes it extremely awkward to deal with. And yeah, as a result, dealing with him is very dangerous. As far as the AI is concerned, he is a very dangerous unit to deal with. At least, again, in very, like, late game, obviously if you're, like, only scoring 740, 750, you're fine, you're never going to have to deal with this. But, you know, if you're dealing with score as high as I do, I don't want to sound like I'm bragging about this. I really am not, but I score in the 752 to 766 range in AA more often than not, which means that I end up dealing with this asshole like 4, 5, 6 times during water season. I had one time where I had to really like deal with him 6 times in one arena assault run. It was awful, utterly awful. I just hate this guy so much, which makes me glad that I actually pulled a Selena because he's a good counter. She's a good counter to him with TA, which then allows you to use other units with blade tones safely. But that's a story for another time. Now, as far as in the end of the player goes, he's going to be a lot worse because in the end of the AI, all it comes down to is, can he kill one of your units? Because if he can, you're boned. You have to restart because you lose points. In the end of the player, you need to kill everything without losing anyone. Crom is borderline suicidal with the AI, which kind of makes it like, oh god, what the hell do I do? It's just in my face. I have to kill him now or else one of my character dies because he hits this damn hard. That's kind of just the problem in general with Crom. There's not much you can do about it, except like, if he doesn't have close counter, use Bold Fighter. If he does have close counter, I mean, just hope for the best. There's a lot of cases where it can be very annoying to deal with, because regardless of who you initiate with, it just dies. He just hits that hard. So, yeah. Overall, Crom is a very frustrating unit to deal with, and not so good in the end of the player, I feel like. He's still a fairly solid unit. I mean, reposition, a 500 SP reposition is pretty useful. To just get your unit out of there and then just back off afterward. But, other than that, as far as a fighting unit goes, it can be a bit awkward because, you know, he's blue, the enemy it typically is green. Winter Sophist can deal with him in some cases, depending on the set. At least, unless he's plus 10, because if he's plus 10, that's a different story. Welcome to plus 10 Crom is just really frustrating to deal with. Plus 0, not so much. Like, he's one of those units that really gain from mergence. But yeah, enough about me talking about Crom. Just basically know that he's a very annoying unit to deal with. Not so much to get, but a very, like, strong unit to deal with. Now for green. Green is a disappointment. So, Yoon. It's a caster that gets extra attack if the enemy has a penalty. Wow, dude. That's epic. There's not much to say here, really. She was one of the first Mythic, and therefore they kind of did not do a whole lot for her. Lyn is also fairly rudimentary. There's not much to say to her. As far as stats are concerned, they are terrible. 31 attack for an archer, a Gen 2 archer, is god-awful, let alone a legendary one. 9 times out of 10, if you compare her to, say, Jamke, Jamke will do a better job. And Jamke is free. Now, if you want to really, like, put this in perspective, let's compare her to one of our newest GHB, also known as Gangrel, who has more HP, more attack, more speed, more def, and I think about the same res, except the difference between Lyn and Gangrel is that Gangrel gets 4 across the board from his weapon instead of 5 attack and speed, and then the attack also get an additional like 8 to 10 true damage based on his res. I don't know what else to say at this point. Lyn is just garbage. She was garbage on launch, and now it's even more apparent that she's awful. Especially considering she's green on a class that's mostly offensive, which are bows. Bows are not exactly defensive outside of Spendthrift Bow, which, you know, Norn. But if you're talking about player phase, you're typically talking about Jamke, Legendary Olm, and so on and so forth. Legendary Olm is just as hard to get as Legendary Lyn. In what world would you want Legendary Lyn over Legendary Olm is beyond me. But yeah. As far as Sed is concerned, Sed is he's a bit of a disappointment purely because of the fact that, I mean, it's Sed. He should be better than this. It could have been a new version of Forseti with like a much better effect than just attack and speed solo on the weapon. Like, seriously, why? Also, it should have been speed def solo to actually help on your defense. I will say one thing about Zed, if you can get speed def solo on him, or potentially just def plus or HP plus, he can function as a fairly solid legendary Crom counter, which, you know, is pretty solid because legendary Crom is just that much of a pest in high level play. So, you know, there's that, but other than that, the main thing he has is Pulse Smoke. Pulse Smoke is a fantastic skill, but it's really only useful in AR. It basically breaks Gale Force units. There's nothing they can do about it. As long as the unit that, you know, the Gale Force unit attacked into still lives, Gale Force get disabled because basically your Gale Force will be ready. Then, whoop, back to one charge. Oh, sorry, you don't get to use Gale Force with me. So, you know, that's kind of the idea behind Pulse Smoke. Other than that, it's pretty good to deal with infantry pulse teams, but that's really it. It's an AR exclusive skill, in my opinion. Outside of AR, it is not as great. As for colorless, you have Wheelchair Duma, you have Grima, which... Gotta be completely honest with you. Grima is a solid unit if you get her to +10, but if you don't have her at +10, she's pretty much worthless. She's the type of unit that really needs merges to function because every stat she gains is helpful. And, well, unless you're desperate to the point that you will +10 her, give up. Give up, my dude. She is just extremely, extremely way past her expiration date. And then there's Eleonora. Eleonora is actually not bad. She does come with attack speed push 4 as well, which is pretty helpful. The problem I have with Eleonora, though, is just the fact that all she has is a fire sweep effect. That does make her fairly solid overall and can actually give her, you know, the advantage in certain maps. Though, you also have to realize Clarice is free. And she has a very similar bow. Like, if you're... Obviously, I'm not saying you should compare +10 to +0, but Eleonora is so hard to merge. Unless you merge her up, Clarice can basically beat her as far as stats goes at +10, just because she gets more flowers. She also gets access to a weapon that does more than just fire sweep and extra attack and speed. And, you know, overall has just more options. So, you know, as a result, I do think Eleonora is... I don't want to say outdated, but she is too expensive for what she gives. Her stat line is really solid, and she can still work as a one-off to deal with certain units in AA. Very good counter to Legendary Azura, because you can literally just put her in the range of Legendary Azura. Obviously, if Legendary Leaf or Crom does not overlap, and just, you know, let her attack you and you kill her immediately. That's extremely helpful. Does actually help a lot, honestly. If you do not have bow units, okay, with low res, but like high enough that they don't get one-shot by Azura, bless some for water season. It is a blessing, my dude. No pun intended. It actually really helps. Because there's a lot of fights where you have to deal with Legendary Azura, especially, like, even if you don't score all that much, if you're scoring a bit above 750 sometimes, this might actually help you. So, you know, that's really it, though. I do think colorless and green are very underwhelming, so I would not pull on them. Blue and red are fairly solid, though they both have a dodge, Sophist and Peony respectively. Because Peony, again, you just need one. If you have more than one, it's kind of irrelevant. Unless you're talking about Mjolnir Strike. But, I mean, even then, you know, it really depends. If you really care about Mjolnir Strike, cool. If you don't, you know, like, why bother, right? But yeah, I think that's about all I have to say about this, though. So, hey, in conclusion, I'm so glad my boy is in. I'm so glad his artist is amazing. I'm so glad his voice actor is amazing. a bit underwhelmed with the way he works as far as the unit goes, but he is still extremely strong as far as that niche goes. We don't have a whole lot of units that have good def and res as far as really any red are concerned. At least not as good as Seliph. There are a few armored units, but there's so many armored killers at that point, they're basically dead on arrival. The main unit I can think of is Halloween Myrrh, but the thing is, Halloween Myrrh doesn't exactly have an enemy phase unless you have Special Fighter Quick Riposte, which means if you're below 80% HP, you're goddamn worthless. Whereas Seliph, it needs to be below 50% to be useless, which makes him extremely solid overall. And, you know, also not being affected by Dragon and Armor Killers certainly helps. Armored Dragons are so boned at this point, guys. Armored Strike should not be given to Armored Dragons, boys! Yeah! God, I hate this. But yeah, hopefully this was informative. And I'm sorry if you guys hear my fan in the back. I'm sorry I also went on a tangent about the tier list for Legendary / Mythic Heroes. That's not exactly the idea, but at the same time, if I ever want to work on a tier list like this, I kinda do have to lay some ground rules for if people aren't actually interested in it. But yeah, I think I covered everything I wanted to say, and with that, hey, I'm gonna see you all in the comments. Have a nice rest of the day, everyone. See ya.